Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Christ in Me with Addie, where we seek to live out a John 3:30 life. John 3:30 says, "He must become greater and greater, and I less and less." Let's be real. In today's world, it can seem impossible to live out what the Bible calls us to do. Not only can it be hard to understand sometimes, but finding the time to read the Bible, to understand the Bible, to know the Bible, it can just be overwhelming. So I created this podcast so we could walk alongside each other, share some of our stories and struggles, but also where the Lord is bringing us, so that we can encourage one another and stay rooted in His Word. It's my prayer that you walk away from each episode saying, I know that is Christ in me. I know Christ in me. So let's get into today's topic. Hey guys, welcome back to Christ in Me with Addie, where today I am joined by someone who has been on the show before, and I said he's the most handsome guest we've ever had. Welcome to the show, my husband, Solomon. Say hey, Sol.
Let's go. I'm back. I'm sorry.
Yes, he's back again. No. Okay, so I brought him back today because I wanted to talk about how to know he or she is the one. And so many people requested this topic. I think it's one that is hard to navigate, which we'll get into this because the Bible doesn't discuss like dating, but it does tell us what to look for when selecting who we want to be with forever, because that's the goal, marriage and then on to forever. So maybe you're in a relationship now and you're wondering, should we take this to the next level? Maybe you long for a future spouse and you want to know just simply some red flags, like preliminary things to look for. The important thing to remember is that marriage is not promised to everyone. I want to make sure, we get this out right in the open right away, that we don't put our marriage like on a pedestal. We love our marriage and it's great. I'm speaking for both of us right now, but I can say I love our marriage. We have so much fun together, but marriage is not like the ultimate goal for a Christian. A good and like daily relationship with God is the ultimate goal for a Christian. So although we're talking about marriage, all those lovey-dovey feels, we still know and recognize that a relationship with our Heavenly Father should be number one. So before diving into this subject, I want to say that, like I said, the Bible doesn't really talk about dating, and that's because in biblical times, brides were betrothed to be with their husbands, and their betrothal process could take several years leading up until their actual wedding date. So you pretty much went from like interest in someone, which was typically arranged by your parents, to straight into like the betrothal or wedding process with that person. So dating, especially how we know modern dating, is not how it looked in the Bible. There was no like swipe right on this person and let's go to like Chick-fil-A and then chill. Like that is not how it worked out. It was, our parents think these two people would make a good fit, and so you guys are going to get married. And so it was a much different process. I think that gotbiblequestions.org, if you guys have never been to that site, they have really great answers to like any biblical question you have, but they explain it best. God doesn't spell out dating for us in the Bible because we have more specifics about a much more important issue. The truth is that the Bible is so clear on what a Christian is and how we are to act that the specifics in dating aren't really necessary. So what it's saying there at gotbiblequestions.org is you should really be assessing the character of the person. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. How do you know he's the one? How do you know she's the one? We're going to tell you those like character things to look for to know that he or she is the one. And we're going to do that by talking about how we started dating, basically, and how that led to our engagement and our wedding season. And Solomon doesn't really know what to expect in this episode. Nope. I just told him, hey, like, you're going to record with me today. So I'm definitely going to embarrass you with a few of these stories. But
yeah,
it's all,
I'm ready for it.
All in good fun. So I wanted to start out by saying, I think the problem with a lot of modern dating is that we're led by chemistry instead of character. I'm going to say that again. We're led by chemistry instead of character. We allow attraction to lead the relationship in hopes that like the morality, the liability, and the trustworthiness will fall into place instead of looking for those things first. Don't get me wrong, God cares about chemistry. He cares about, having that connection with someone. But I think so many of these like relationship dating shows that we see on Netflix, or all these, celebrities that we hear about dating, they're always like insanely hot people that are led to other insanely hot people. And we aren't looking at the heart check over the hotness sometimes, right? So today, Saul and I are going to share the story of how we met, but how God confirmed for us that we were meant to move towards marriage.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the first time we met. And Saul, I'm going to let you take this one away because, I'll kind of state where I was and why I was there. But I was not really a Christian yet. And I had just started attending a church for the first time in like probably a decade. You guys can hear like the specifics in the background in my testimony episode, but I was raised Catholic and I stepped into a non-denominational church. God just kind of met me there and I decided to audition for the worship team. So I'll let you carry the story from here.
Yeah. So, where to begin? I just remember this being like right before COVID, and usually during auditions, I would go in and help, just like with the setup, introduce myself, and just like make sure that they were all good to go from like an audio standpoint so that she could hear herself in her in-ears and that it wasn't too loud in the house, just because you don't really want too many outside people to hear it, just in case it went really bad, especially vocal ones. But when I first met her, I do remember just being like, whoa, all right, she's pretty. But afterwards, I do remember asking my brother how old she was, and he said, no, you're not going for her. Also, she has a boyfriend at the time. So it was a decent first time. I'm usually pretty good with like new people and at least like introducing myself and being kind. But I remember during the audition, I was up in our production room, but I was still listening, and I was pretty impressed with what I was hearing.
Yeah, it was funny to me because the first time we met, I was coming in for an audition. So like honestly, if you would have asked me everyone's name in the room, I would have only remembered like the worship leader and his wife, and did not remember you at all because I was so nervous and you were just kind of there. But I do think it's funny to reminisce now how your brother was like, yeah, no. Because were you 18 at the time? You were really young.
I was at least 19 or 20.
Okay, so you were like...
Probably 19.
Still in college, though.
Yes.
And I was much out of college. So those who don't know, we have just a little bit of an age gap.
Could be worse.
Tiny little age gap. So anyways, that's the first time that we met. And like I said, Saul was just like not really on my radar. I think actually I had just gotten out of a relationship at the time. Okay. I don't think I was still in the relationship. But anyway, so I wanted to talk about too, this is fast forward like a couple months, but we got put together I designed some like shirts for our church, and we got put together in the photos. Do you remember that?
Yes,
they were like pairing people to get photos together. And for those watching on YouTube, I'm going to throw this photo up because it's just so hilarious to me. But Solomon's standing behind me and I'm just sitting in the front like, this is so weird. I hope he's not getting like weird little kicks out of getting a photo with me. And it's so funny because Solomon at the time, he thought his hair looked so good like this. But he has like naturally kind of curly hair and he would brush it out and kind of sweep it to the side. And it just looked a little wild. And so he still has his old hair in the photo, and it's just funny to me. But that was like the awkward friend stage where it was like, I know of you, but I'm not really interested in you. But how did you feel at that time?
Yeah, I just remember being in a very interesting stage of life, I would say.
You were in a relationship too then, right?
Either that or I like had recently cut it off because it was leading up to Easter. So it was like near the end of that relationship. But I just remember being so overwhelmed with work and school and just so much that I didn't really have too much else on my mind, per se. But
again, we were not interested in each other at all. Like we knew of each other, but there was just no connection, and I even thought Saul was kind of mean, like in the beginning. So I remember I was new to the worship team, so I'd made it on. And for those who don't know, worship leaders wear these little headphones, like earbuds, that give them the click so we're all at the same tempo. They give you cues that say like verse or, different things like that so you know what to sing or what's coming up next. I was having a really hard time like getting used to that and adjusting them, and Saul, being the sound engineer for our church formerly, was the one that I would ask for help. So I called him over and I was like, "Hey Saul, like I'm just having trouble like hearing myself. Is there any way you could bring me up like through the speakers in the house?" And Solomon looks at me. He was having a bad day, to give him some credit here, but he looked at me and he goes, "Just so you know, you don't ask the sound engineer to turn you up in the house." And then he walked away, and I just remember sitting there like, I'll never sing again. I'll never volunteer again. I'm an idiot, And Saul thought I was a diva for being like, "Bring me up in the house." So
She was.
I was not. We did not like each other at the beginning. I thought he was kind of mean. He thought I was a diva. So again, all that to say, no connection, no like interest at all. And then it gets worse. Easter finally comes around. And this is like 3 years before we actually started dating, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Easter comes around. And so long story short, my family's not very close at all. And I got very close with Saul's brother and his wife. We all became good friends. And I became like best friends with his wife. So I was much more... If anyone was my family first, it was truly Solomon's brother and then his wife. So anyways, they knew that my family was kind of estranged and that we didn't really meet for holidays anymore. So they invited me to their family Easter and just like all the holidays. So the first Easter I went to with his family, I remember I had just finished up eating, like had a great time, and I had to head out. And so I had left and I forgot my keys or something. So I had to walk back in. And as I'm walking back in, everyone's going, "Solomon, oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And then as soon as my like body rounded the corner, I smelled it. Saul absolutely let one rip in front of his whole family after I had left. And he just turned around, and his face in shock when he saw me in the doorway was like, "No, oh my gosh," and they're all like hitting his shoulder like, "You're disgusting." And I was like, "I just need my keys." And then what did your sister say to you after?
She said, "Way to impress your future wife." And we had never been talking or interested in each other. So I
thought Saul was like kind of gross, kind of like viewed him as like a little brother. And when I had heard that his sister joked that like I was his future wife, I was like, no way, not a chance.
Goals.
But anyways, I wanted to talk about how we kind of knew of each other's character before we kind of knew each other, if that makes sense. Like, we knew of each other. I knew enough about your family through your brother and his wife to know how you were raised and stuff like that. But what did you recognize about my character as a person before we were even like romantically interested in each other?
I would say the more that I got to know you and like work with you, because that's how we grew closer. And through work, we also led a lot of the youth group in our church. So we did a lot of the worship, the games, the snacks together. So it was like a weekly thing and a weekend thing where we always just ended up kind of hanging out. But the more that I got to know you, the more I found out like, oh, wow, she's an extremely caring person, and like she works really hard, and similarly to me, like really puts in your full effort to make sure that like this is going to be my product. So I want to make sure that it gets served with excellence, that it looks good, and that it tastes good, smells good, like anything. Like it's you delivered with excellence, and that's something that I really find pretty attractive.
It's so funny that you just said, like, make sure it looks good, smells good, tastes good. Saul and I ask each other these questions every Sunday, and one of the questions is, how did I make you feel loved this week? And he's always like, your food, what you cooked. So,
Amazing.
The fact that you just said looks good, smells good, I'm like, he's thinking about my cooking again. But when it comes to your character, before we really knew each other, I noticed similarly just like how hard you work for not just your family and friends, but like truly everyone around you. You are like so reliable. You're the go-to guy for everybody, and you just have such a big heart. Like, you could say no to people who come to you because so many people come to you for help, but you never do. And so that's one of my favorite things about you is that you're just so caring, so kind, but you also are like just amazingly gifted at everything you do. And that stuck out to me right away before I was even like romantically interested in you. So he had mentioned it, but when things started to pick up for us in a romantic sort of way, it was 3 years after the Easter fart incidents. It was 3 years after I auditioned for the worship team, and Saul already said it, but we worked together at our church. So when I got saved, I went full-time into ministry. God opened that door for me. And so we were co-workers for a little while. And I remember our youth was kind of struggling at the time, the youth group. And so they asked Saul and I to kind of step in as interim youth leaders. And so we were heavily focused in the worship sect. But I just remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to be leading worship with this guy that I don't really know, who I kind of remember was like a little annoying, a little weird, a little gross from the past. And so my mind was already set on how that was going to go. And then you walk through the door. I remember you like strut through the door and your hair was cut and it wasn't like that brushed out curl anymore. You had like the cute little like scrunch curls in the front and you had on a new jean jacket from Target. And I was like, oh, that is not how I remember him. But what did you think when you first walked through the door and saw me? Because I think I was brunette at that time. Like I used to be bleach blonde.
Yeah.
And I was brunette. So what was it like for you to see me?
I was like, what is she doing with her hair?
Hopefully you liked it.
Oh, I did.
So yeah, we went through pretty big changes, like life changes. I'd become much more like grounded in my faith. I would say I went from being like someone really introed into the faith to actually being like a leader in the faith at that point in time. Like God had really done a work in me, and you had finished school. So it was weird for me to see you like out of college then, just so much different and still having that great character, but also like much more matured, I guess. And I remember I was like, I think I am attracted to him. And it was so weird for me. And I went to Lucy, who's now my sister-in-law, and that's his brother's wife, and asked her, like, is it inappropriate that I think I'm attracted to Solomon? And she was like, no, like, you should go for it. Now we're going to actually be sisters. And so that was just so cool. But we truly fell in love over worship. Like, we fell in love.
We bonded very closely and grew closer to one another.
Yeah, and we fell in love over God. Yeah. Like, I remember when I had a whole journal to my future husband with like different prayers to God for my future husband. Yes, that is you, Solomon. Different, like, I wrote down just like my wish list, kind of, not expecting perfection or anything, but I just remember writing like, God, I pray that he shares my love for music, because I couldn't imagine a household like without music. And so I realized I love leading worship, but I do have some stage fright. And anyone who knows me knows that I have my eyes closed typically whenever I lead worship, because it helps me forget about like the congregation or the people looking at me. And it helps me just focus on God and ushering in the moment, the Holy Spirit, not just for others, but also myself into my own heart. So it kind of takes away that, that pressure in a way, that pressure of performance, and moves it into more of just like a, this is for you, God, sort of thing. But I realized that in all the times that Solomon and I led worship for the youth, that my eyes were always open. And that was like a crazy revelation moment for me, where I was like, God, I have so much peace with this person. And like, I've seen his heart through how he worships and how he serves, like, especially the youth, like seeing how you served kids and how you served even the ones who were the most troubled, that like some avoided, you didn't avoid them. You actually like went for them. You went even deeper into trying to like connect with them and help them know like true Jesus. And it just, it gave me so much peace and comfort to not only worship with you, but see you in that sort of like those God intimate moments. And so that's when the switch sort of flipped for me. But what was it for you when you were like, I think I'm attracted to her?
Yeah, honestly, seeing like the personality flip for you as well, where like I could tell that God had really truly become the center of all that you were doing, and like you were fully all in serving Jesus. And that was just something that I had honestly lacked in all my previous relationships, where it was just like, it was all just driven by earthly desires or some other form. And like truly it was like, all right, I really need to focus on my relationship with God, but honestly, I would say God really brought us together because I really would not have been interested in you without like God really moving through us together and like making us work and lead worship with each other. And like it was just truly an awesome experience. And like slowly over time is really when it was like, oh, well, I mean, we're already really good friends. We already do this and that together. So like I guess it wouldn't be that weird to date.
Yeah. I think we were more worried about how like your family would respond because again, like I had been coming to all of his family's holiday parties just as like that friend who had nowhere else to go. So I got kind of like grandfathered in, I remember when we did officially start dating, the first family holiday party I went to as your girlfriend was so much different. Like the vibe around your mom, it was like just so much different because she had her eye on me, like, are you guys walking in purity? How are things going? Which I love her for, but it was funny how everything was different after that. But I had something so different in mind for my future husband because I had come out of a really bad breakup 3 years before Solomon and I started dating. So I was being very careful, very protective with my heart, with my physical self, because those boundaries were broken before. And I just remember I had like such a checklist with God and promises that I made to God for my next relationship. And so I just had something different in mind. Like I pictured someone so much older than me who, had been so mature, who would be so set in their career, who, could provide me like a stable household and all these things. And here was Solomon, like just out of school, a few years younger than me. And like you had such amazing things going for you. But again, it's just not what I had in mind. And so I kind of had let my own expectations blind me from what God was putting right in front of me. And so I wanted to talk about like the 4 C's in dating. And this is by no means like an original to me thing that I'm sharing with you guys. This is something that even my spiritual mentor had brought up to me when I had brought up Solomon and I was like, I think I want to date him. She took me through the 4 C's. So the first one is character. What is the person's character like? So this is to help you remove your expectations for what you think that you want or need and to sort of ask yourself these questions analytically to see, am I looking for a godly relationship? And I really think these 4 C's embody that. So the first one is character. What's their character like? Are they trustworthy? Are they reliable? What are their friends like? Where do they spend their time? And what is their attitude in stressful situations? So I remember on our 3rd date, this wasn't really a test. Like I didn't plan this in a manipulative way or anything, but Solomon being his helpful self, I was like, hey, I have this coffee table that I just ordered and I really need help putting it together. I was like, how about I throw a movie on and we can like build this coffee table together. So this was our 3rd date. And I remember we were just so distracted by the conversation, like getting to know you, you getting to know me, that we had to build and then unbuild, unassemble this table 3 times. And there was one moment where I could see the frustration on your face. Like after we messed it up the first time, we were like, oh, haha, let's try again. The second time, I could see your eye twitching a little bit in the corner, and you were like, oh, here we go again. But the 3rd time was really when I was like, uh-oh, how is he going to respond? But you stayed like real. I could tell you were annoyed because you're like, man, I just did this again. And I also didn't have a drill at the time, like an electric drill. So you were screwing each screw in by hand, and it was taking forever. But I kind of loved it because it was longer that I got to spend with you. But in that moment, you didn't get angry. You didn't throw the drill or the little screwdriver to the ground and yell and be like, I'm done with this, And I think it's those moments that determine people's character the most. So what are they like in stressful situations? And the other one too, like what are their friends like? Also ask yourself, what do my friends think of this person? And you have to take that with a grain of salt because if you are new to the Christian faith and like none of your friends are Christian yet, they're not going to be quite looking for the same thing that a Christian friend would be looking for. But I remember even before I was Christian, a lot of my friends did not like my ex at all. And I was constantly like justifying the things that he was doing to them, or like kind of making excuses for his behavior. And they consistently told me like, hey, like that was not cool. That's not it. So really analyze like, what are the people around you saying about the person that you're interested in? Just make sure you're being observant to those little things. The next C is chemistry. And as I mentioned, I think a lot of times we lead with chemistry instead of character, but God still cares about chemistry. Like sexual intimacy is a huge part of marriage. And so, God doesn't just want you to settle on this guy because he knows his Bible really well if you're not attracted to him. Like, and it goes the other way for a girl. So are you attracted to this person? And I know for myself, I was the type of person who like, I'm not really attracted to someone until I know them deeply. Yeah. Like, I don't really have a celebrity crush, and I know that idea is kind of normalized, but I think we should sort of unnormalize it, because that's just like, hey, who do you lust after? Like, that's what that question essentially is. So I don't really have a celebrity crush, nothing like that, because it really takes me getting to know someone to be attracted to them. And like Solomon said, God provided those moments for us in worship to get to know each other, knowing my heart, and that's how I operate to form that attraction to him. So God cares about the physical connection because that's a part of marriage. The next C is calling. What are they passionate about in life? Is it something that you align with, or is it something that goes against what you believe? Like I know that I personally could never be with, for example, like a doctor who maybe does like abortions. That's something that's a huge moral flag to me that I just couldn't be with someone like that. It would cause arguments in the marriage, like cause strains, things like that. So what do they do for a career? And, something about me and Solomon that we kind of talked about is that we're highly driven people. So I couldn't be with someone who's like really lazy and sort of lacks goals, lacks ambition, because I'm someone who has a lot of drive. And so do you guys have similar, drives that make you compatible as well? What is their calling? But I think the biggest calling to look for in someone's life is, do they love and know Jesus? 2 Corinthians 6:14-15 says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership does righteousness have with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? This verse may seem a little harsh, but when it's saying do not be unequally yoked, I know that word yoked is kind of weird because you think about eggs or, I don't know, something breakfast themed. But what that's saying is make sure that there is some sort of common ground between you guys, and make sure that ground is the solid rock of Christ. Because without that, there's cracks in your foundation. You're building a house on sand and not a house on stone. And so, I think, again, the biggest calling that someone can have on their life is knowing Jesus. This is sort of a really overused analogy, but it's a very good one. Picture a triangle, and God is at the top point of that triangle, and then you and your partner are on the bottom 2 points of that triangle. As you're running up the triangle towards God, you also become closer together. But if you are constantly just running, can you hold up a triangle, Solomon, for those watching on YouTube? Yeah. If you are constantly running between the 2 bottom points of the triangle, notice how you're far apart. But the closer you run towards God, you're closer together as a couple. And so that's why I think it's so important to have Christ in the center. At first, before I was a believer, it would make me sad when people would say, like, find someone who loves God more than you, because selfishly, like, I wanted to be the number one. But with that analogy, like, I get it. We literally are farther apart from one another when we are far from God.
Yep.
And so if you don't commit yourself to someone who loves Jesus, you can't expect them to love you the way that Jesus wants you to be loved. You can't expect them to still choose you in your future marriage, even when things get hard, and you can't expect them to hold on to, the things that the Bible tells us to hold on to. That's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, even when the situation is everything but, unless they know God and they know his word. So if you found your guy, when you were out clubbing in a tight little two-piece, you can't expect him not to find a piece on the side when he was led with his eyes and not his commitment. And that goes the same way for girls. So really think about, like, what are you leading with? Are you calling them into your life through your body and how you're presenting yourself? Or are you calling them into your life by being an exemplary like man of God, woman of God? And so as I'm sharing like what to look for in a guy or what to look for in a girl, I really want you to do some like self-reflection and think too, like, am I someone worth pursuing? Like, am I someone who knows Christ enough to be someone who could be a great partner to someone else? So the last C is confirmation. You need to seek the wisdom, discernment, and confirmation of God before dating someone or before marriage, especially. Like, you need that God confirmation to know, like, is this where I'm going, Lord, or am I walking out of your will? So talk to a trusted Christian mentor. Saul has great Christian parents, and I know you did before we were married. You got a lot of advice from them and things like that. But is God giving you any conviction or red flags against this person, or is he giving you peace? I know I mentioned this in another podcast episode. I have a hair on my face, don't mind me. Okay, I mentioned this in another podcast episode, but Saul's mom took me to Cracker Barrel, good old Cracker Barrel, on our first, like, let's get to know each other as potentially future mom-in-law. And I remember she was like, let's pray together. And I said, okay. And she took my hand. She goes, Lord, if this is not your will, end it now and end it quickly. And I just remember thinking, like, oh man, she doesn't like me. She's like literally praying me away on the first day. And in hindsight, I'm so glad she prayed that, because she prayed that so that we were walking in God's will. She was praying like, God, don't let them waste each other's time or emotion or, anything like that. And if it's not your will, Lord, like, we don't want it. And I'm so grateful she prayed that prayer, because I was, in fact, not driven out of your family. And here we are. So is God giving you any conviction against this person? I remember in previous dating relationships, I felt so much anxious, like, urgency to get them to propose to me, which I know I've shared with you, Saul. Like, I felt like I just had to lock them down before Armageddon happened or something, Before I was a Christian, this was relationships before I was a Christian, I felt the need to, like, get them to commit before something happened. And if we're ever acting in the next step of our relationship out of fear of losing them or fear of the relationship falling apart, we can pretty much discern from that that's not from God, because fear doesn't come from God. And so a huge confirmation I had in our relationship is just the amount of peace that surrounded it and the amount of trust I had in you because of your character. So I want to talk about the different God confirmations that we had during our dating and then engagement season that really told us that God was like, okay, this is God's will and we are headed in the right direction. So something that was so crazy about our relationship is that we said, I love you just 3 days into dating. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but I had so much love for Solomon as a friend that when that turned romantic and we actually started dating, like, that love didn't just go away. Like, I loved you and your family and, your brother and now our sister-in-law. Like, I loved you guys as family before you and I were even married or dating. And so that's why it was so easy for me to say, I love you just 3 days in. But how did you feel, like, confident and comfortable to be like, I love you just 3 days in?
It was just very, again, like, we knew each other for so long before. And so knowing who you were before and then how you were then was a huge change. And honestly, like, we'd just grown so close to each other that once we officially started dating and became, like, closer meaning in 3 days, I just kind of had that knowledge of just, like, all right, I mean, this is how I truly feel, and I'm confident about it, and that's just what I'm going to say. I don't know. But it was funny because we both stood at the door. It was right before I was about to leave at her apartment. And we both just kind of had that look on each other's face. And I was like, I don't know if I should say it. And she was like, say it. I was like, I don't know.
I was like, say it. It was like the scene from Twilight when she's like, say it out loud. I love you.
It was just really cool.
It was cool because we were both feeling the same thing in the same moment. I just remember thinking, like, this is crazy. Mm-hmm. And I'm someone who, like, struggled with trust, and I'm not going to say that I still do or anything because, like, that is free and gone in Jesus' name. But I struggled with, like, giving that many of my cards away, if you want to say. Like, I'm someone who held my cards close to my chest. Like, I don't want to say I love you because that means I could get super hurt if this doesn't go the right way. But God gave me that peace that this is safe, like, say it, and then you felt the same way. So it was just amazing. But I think we have to, like, not just go by feeling. We have to, again, like, really pray and discern and ask God, are you leading me into a safe green pasture, or am I straying out of it, you know? But we had some other God confirmations too. Saul got a new job. He didn't work at the church anymore, and that was kind of sad in the moment because I was like, this is great. We get to hang out all day, every day, and have lunch together and get paid for it. But he had applied for this job 3 other times, right? Yep. And then he finally got it, and it was amazing because his salary doubled. And, like, without that, we would not have been led into our marriage season. Like, it wouldn't have been financially possible for us had you not gotten that job. Yeah. The other thing, this is, like, several months down the line, like almost nine months down the line, we found our wedding venue. Mm-hmm. And I remember we weren't engaged yet. We had just been talking about marriage. Like, both of us had that on our heart, but we didn't know how we were going to, like, financially do it. I had a ministry salary. Saul was still, like, pretty fresh in his job. And I just remember we were like, let's look at venues and just see the price and, like, see what we have to work with that. You know, we had some savings, but we weren't sure what to expect. So we got on some wedding websites. I made some accounts, you know, on, like, The Knot, on different things like that. And I remember I started, like, crying a little bit the night that we did that, because I just looked at him and I was like, I don't know how we're going to afford any of these. Like, what I envisioned for our wedding day and what I'm hoping for, what God knows is on my heart, is just something that seems, like, so unachievable with these prices. And so I remember, like, getting kind of choked up and just feeling like, God, are we not supposed to get married? Like, how are you going to make a way for us with, you know, it felt like a loaves and fishes situation. And so the crazy part of that story is the next day, literally the next day, we got a message because I had made an account. Like, a venue reached out and they were like, hey, we saw that you're planning for a date sometime in July, and we just want to reach out because we have one open date left in July, and it's actually a discounted date, so, like, let me know your thoughts. And we booked it that day. Not even engaged yet, but we had that God confirmation of, like, we want to get married. And also, when I got choked up the night before, we prayed and we were like, God, if you really want us to get married right now, the way that we, like, are feeling called to be married right now, help us. Like, give us some sort of way, some sort of sign. You know, I hate to use that verbiage, but we were like, God, we need to know, like, you're in this and that this is the right time. Yeah. And so when we got that message, and it was literally the exact aesthetic we were going for our venue, the price was so well within our range, actually, like, abundantly lower than our range. Yeah. And so we booked it, and it was scary for me. I didn't have a ring on my finger yet. So for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to book a wedding venue with this guy. But again, God was, like, confirming all these things in our lives. The next thing that kind of was a huge confirmation is we were about a month off from, this is after we did officially get engaged. We were about a month off from our official wedding date, and we were also somehow $1,000 off from our projected budget. And so we were just kind of looking at each other like, I don't know where we're going to come up with this, like, this $1,000. Like, I don't know where this is going to come from. Yeah. But the Lord has provided this far. So, like, let's just pray about it like we've been. And again, the next day, we received like, kind of anonymous check from an estranged family member for the exact amount that we needed. And we were like, truly only God could have softened this heart for them to contribute towards our wedding. Like, only God. And so that was another huge God confirmation. But the biggest confirmation of all, Solomon, was that Mac loved you.
Oh my gosh.
Mac is his adopted daughter. My dog.
Forced adopted daughter.
No, I got a dog before Saul and I met, and she's a little picky with the people that she likes, but she, I hate to admit it, loves Solomon more than me. So now we're one big happy family, and she's so happy to have a dad. Like, this is so cringe, but I remember when I was single and I was like really in my feels, I used to cry and hug her and be like, I'm gonna find you a dad one day, I promise. And now here we are. So biggest confirmation of all, Mac loves him. So,
Hallelujah.
I want to be sure to say that not all God confirmations are like sunshine and rainbows. Mm-hmm. Not all God confirmations are things working out always in your way. Like, for example, if you're struggling with that too, I have an episode called Does Prayer Really Work? Where I break down like why not every prayer like goes our way, or why we even pray if things don't always go our way. So if you're struggling with that, go back and listen to Does Prayer Really Work? But God confirmations and situations where God confirmations are situations where God gives you abundant peace. So, for example, when I got out of that really bad relationship I talked about before I met Solomon, I knew that it was going to be hard. It was going to be painful. And to be honest, it did suck. It absolutely sucked because everything in my life turned completely upside down. But what God rewarded me for in obedience was peace. So, no. Things were not going my way. It was not the future that I thought. It was not how I wanted the relationship to work out. But I had the confirmation from God that I needed to end that relationship. And when I did, I just breathed out this deep sigh of relief. And he like rewarded my heart essentially with peace because of my obedience. So, you know, even this past week, it was so funny how our pastor was joking with us that how scary similar Solomon and I are at times and in our mannerisms. And again, like, I just never would have expected this from the guy farting on Easter that is burned so deeply in my mind.
It's a learned behavior that once you get married, you both become
Similar.
One, literally one.
It's true. And it's biblical to become one in marriage. So what is the biggest thing to look for in a guy or to look for in a girl? I can give my answer for this, but I wanted to say no one is perfect. Like, everyone should be striving to embody Christ's life, but with the understanding and expectation that no one can be Jesus. Like, if you're looking for a perfect person, it literally doesn't exist in anyone other than Jesus. I think the question to ask is, are they trying? Like, are they trying to the best of their ability to live a life like Christ? So, you know, Jesus had uncompromising character so that we could have uncompromising standards. Jesus had uncompromising character so that we could have uncompromising standards. Jesus didn't just live for us and die for us to settle on someone who lives by them on some days and then doesn't live by him on other days. The biggest thing to look for, in my opinion, is someone who truly lives for and loves Jesus. A Christian can say that they're a Christian and not truly live for Jesus as part of their daily lives. So I would really assess, like, what does their daily walk with Christ look like? Are they trying? And so if someone truly loves Jesus, they're going to righteously fight for you the way that Jesus flipped tables in the temple. If someone truly loves Jesus, they're going to put you above themselves, but God above all else. And if someone truly loves Jesus, they're not just going to respect your purity and your faith, they're going to protect your purity and your faith. If they aren't God's first, then they don't need to be yours.
Yep.
What would you say is the biggest thing to look for, you know, a guy giving another guy advice?
Yeah, I would say that.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. And does he say bless you after you sneeze?
No, I would say for a guy, especially nowadays, it's a lot easier to just be like, wow, she's really pretty. But like, really take the time to, as we were discussing earlier, to really know their character and see like what you guys really align on. And even going through those hard discussions really helps like define, okay, yeah, like we agree on these things or we don't agree on these things. And something that my sister told me forever ago, and some of my past relationships was, can you see yourself with that person in the future, or do you think that if you can live with that without that person, then you guys are not meant to be? And so that is something that you really have to ask yourself, is like, do I strive with or without this person? Do we feed really well off of each other? But at the same time, don't forget God, because he really is the reason why you can stick with each other and like really have the patience, because there are some days where you really have to pray like, all right, Lord, give me the patience and all the fruits of the Spirit in order to get through this day. Even like coming home from a bad day at work, and then like, not saying you have to deal with your wife, but like some days it's really hard to just be like, I'm used to going home and just going straight to my bed and staring at the paint on the wall cracking. Whereas now it's like, no, I actually have someone else that like loves me and cares about me, and like knowing how to embrace that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true, because there are days where, Saul and I have this thing where whether he's the first to come home from work or I'm the first to come home, that person gets up and they greet the husband or wife at the door and give them a big old hug. And it doesn't matter what your day looked like. It doesn't matter what our conversations looked like the night before or anything like that. You just get up and you give that person a hug. And that's been like literally therapeutic in our relationship. I love that we do that. I love that that's how we greet each other. And like, it's also given me excitement to go home, at the end of the day. Cause I'm like, I just get to go hug my husband now. And so yeah, is that something that you see in that person, like those moments, or is that not the future that you see with the person that you have in mind as we share these stories, or maybe you don't have anyone in mind yet and you're just trying to prepare your heart. But the other thing I wanted to say about what you just said, Saul, is you were like, don't just find somebody who's really hot. And I think the hard part about this generation is like, they have been raised, and even I have like given into this too, to find dates from Tinder, to find dates from, and that's like, it's hard to be patient on God when those things are available to us. And I'm not going to say like, you can't find a godly relationship from Tinder. Like, I don't know, God works in mysterious ways. Maybe he can, but I have not seen it work out very well, but anyways, we're used to swiping on how we think someone looks at first glance. We're used to deciding, whether or not we want to be with someone based on what their Instagram feed looks like. But, the Bible is very clear about saying that there's something in marriage, like you have something to offer as a wife that's just for your husband. Your husband has something to offer to you as a wife as just your husband. And so as you're looking at whether they have a Tinder profile or an Instagram profile, ask yourself, are they saving something? If you're like considering them as a future girlfriend or boyfriend, are they saving something for just me when I look at this? Or is what they have available to everyone? I think that's another thing to look for is, do they have something that's just for me, or is this something that they give to everyone? So that is our story, kind of how we fell in love, how God confirmed our relationship in our life, and hopefully you guys found some good takeaways too on what to look for in a future guy or a future girl, or how to know he or she is the one. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. Thanks, Saul, for joining again.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for tuning in to Christ in Me with Addie, and I will see you guys next time.
See ya.